All right, so welcome to Tea and Tarot for June. Happy to be back in the saddle with this practice. And we are looking at the queens. And so I want you to go into your deck and pull out the four queens of the four suits. Queen of Cups, Pentacles, Wands, and Swords. Or in your deck, there may be other names for those suits, but in either way, there will probably be four queen equivalent cards. And just pull them out and put the rest of the deck away. So we're going to be looking at a close focus on these four ladies today. And so the first thing I want us to do is to just go ahead and take a moment and get present. Turn your face away and mix up those queen cards, because we're going to see which one is with you today. Which of these four archetypes is with you today? We'll see as we go through. Okay, go ahead. Which one of the queens you represent today? So now I'm going to just have you hold that in your head, which one was yours, so that as I go through and describe these different queens, you have an opportunity to see what might be the message for you in the queen that you chose for today. And I'm just gonna make sure everybody's muted. It's not to be rude, it's just because I get a little feedback if not. So I just want to make sure everybody's here. All right, so this is in June, the month of the Mother archetype in the Mount Shasta Goddess Temple. And so we've been analyzing over the course of this month what the Mother means and what the Mother archetype brings up for people and what kinds of circumstances we might encounter that Mother archetype. And one of the biggest things in Goddess community that I think can help us all is to have healing around the Mother. Namely, that if we can see our mothers as who they are for themselves rather than who they are to us, we can have a lot of perspective on them, and we can let them kind of just be human rather than kind of putting them on this pedestal or wanting them to be different or regretting that, you know, they aren't different or what, either way. So we're going to go through and I'm going to talk about these four queen cards as Mother archetypes and the kinds of behaviors one might see from each of these. And this is just according to my experience of the queens in the tarot. Your definitions of the queens in the tarot may have alternate or added dimensions because of your experience with the cards. So know that everything I'm sharing here today is just from my perspective, but I'm also open to your perspectives on these queens. And most of all, what I'm hoping that this exercise will do today is to help you feel confident and comfortable helping people move through their mother issues if you're doing readings for them, and or helping you move through your own if you have any. So let's go ahead and start with the element of air and the Queen of Swords. Of all four of the mothers in this deck, the Queen of Swords is the least likely to actually have physical living children. The Queen of Swords tends to be more descriptive of issues related to fertility, issues related to having had a stillbirth or an abortion, issues related to having sometimes regrets around motherhood or pain around motherhood. I would say that the Queen of Swords, it often represents the childless mother in certain contexts in a reading. But when the Queen of Swords is actually a physical mother or is a mother to a child who's come into her life, um, she tends to be very strict, very stern, not very emotional, not very connected from the heart, but um, technically very proficient. So she can make sure that there's food on the table, or that there's um, clothing that is in the right size, or that there's, the details attended to for schoolwork. But in terms of warmth, cuddling, appreciation, emotional involvement, she tends to be more uh, recalcitrant and stepped back a little bit. The Queen of Swords sometimes has had a traumatic birth situation, and that has cut off, because of her trauma, the ability to feel that initial maternal bonding that is often hormonally motivated. That initial maternal bonding, when it's been missed, can then cause a rift between mother and child. And this can happen for any number of different reasons. And it's not like a anybody's fault situation. It's just that maternal birth trauma happens sometimes, where there's excessive blood loss or the need for an emergency C-section or something like that, that wildly derails the planned for or desired birth. So the Queen of Swords can represent sometimes the ache that a mother is carrying around because her birth experience was not favorable and in fact was straight up traumatic. And in a lot of social situations, she'll feel even more isolated because other people might be talking about their birth experiences or asking her, how was it? Or, you know, anticipating that this was a joyous and happy event because she has her baby. But it's hard for her to reconcile the fact that she's been through something that was physically extremely difficult and mentally traumatic and emotionally traumatic, and she's trying to connect with her infant, but there can be that fear or that apprehension there. And so this can, be a painful circumstance. And sometimes I've gotten this card where a mother is here having a reading because she's afraid that she doesn't connect as well with her child. Or sometimes this comes up when there's someone having a reading who is wondering, why didn't my mother love me? And you can kind of help that person see that if their mother was making sure food was on the table and was making sure that they were dressed and had what they needed for school and taking care of their physical needs, but that if she wasn't necessarily overly warm, that her way of expressing love was through those physical, attending to the physical details, but maybe her heart wasn't very open because of her own trauma. And usually when I get to that point in a reading with a client where we're really like getting deep into this particular mother archetype, the client will say, oh yeah, she was raped as a young woman, or she went through something horrible, or she had a very difficult birth. And then we can start to peel back the layers. Thank you. It should be on the shelf in there, but that's okay. I'll just drink. Look how sweet my husband brought tea. So in that Queen of Swords archetype, there is this wound that the Queen of Swords mother carries, and she herself is in pain over it. And she might not know how to rectify that pain, because if she was abused as a child, or if she carried a legacy of pain, or if she had a traumatic birth experience, or if she was raped, or if she had wanted to have an abortion and was told she couldn't by a husband or a priest or some parent. This is the kind of stuff that interferes right at the root of that mother-child relationship. And then it becomes difficult for that mother and child to blossom in their love together. Now, just because someone's had a traumatic birth experience doesn't mean that they'll automatically have this. Just because someone was abused as a child doesn't mean they'll automatically have this situation. They might not. They may have transcended it. They may have done work around it to get past it. And that's not the archetype, even if it is the background. But when this is the archetype that comes up in a reading, it is worth, especially around the mother, it is worth asking, did your mom have a traumatic past that you know about? Or did your mom have a hard time with you when she was pregnant? Um, I would say that most mothers are more than one of these archetypes. They're not just one. So, for example, I would say my own mother is a combination Queen of Swords, Queen of Wands type, and we're going to hear all about the Queen of Wands in a minute. Because my mother's very intellectual. That's another aspect of the Queen of Swords. She's extremely intellectual. She's very motivated by learning and study. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry to hear it, Devora. I will send, the recording will be on YouTube and you can watch it or listen to it later. And also, I had vertigo this week too. Hope you're well. Take care. One of our sisters has to step out. I had terrible vertigo this week and a couple other friends did too. So this Queen of Swords is also a keen intellectual, a very sharp problem solver. She's the kind of person who will go to battle for you, will stand up for you. So this can be another way that a Queen of Swords shows her love, is that sometimes she might be a little sharp with you, but she's way more sharp with people who would hurt you. And so there's a protective nature there. So even though she might not be super warm or affectionate, you're loved when she stands up for you. This is the kind of mother who would chase a kid down the block with her sandal. She'll be ferocious. And there is an aspect also in the Queen of Swords of the kind of mother that is really pushing her child. This is kind of the final layer of the Queen of Swords. So even if, the issues of warmth aren't so serious, even if she is pretty warm, she has influences maybe of some of these other queen cards in her personality. There is also kind of an aspect of high expectations, and she will push you. She would be the kind of mother who will have you in language lessons or music lessons or extracurricular activities or summer camp or 3 or 4 summer camps or, things like that. And it's because she's always kind of pushing to your excellence. This is the kind of the mother who at the age of 8 starts saying, not that I'd know anything about this, you better be ready to get a scholarship to go to college. You're going to have to be really competitive. You're going to have to get in there. They're not going to accept you if you don't have good grades. So I'm going to share a little bit about my Queen of Swords mother. My Queen of Swords mother loved me very, very much. She had a very hard time with my pregnancy and, in fact, almost lost me. And basically, at one point, when she was hemorrhaging and thought that she was going to lose me, she just basically said to her belly, okay, baby, it's up to you. If you want to be here, you're going to have to make your way here because the doctors have done everything. I'm doing everything I can, and there is nothing else we can do. And so I like to think that I was like, all right, I'll take that challenge, and came into life because I did make it, obviously. But it was a hard pregnancy. It was a difficult labor and delivery. It was really not easy. And she didn't ever want to do it again after the once. And she is an intellectual, and she is tough as nails. And during growing up in school, I was not allowed to have anything less than a 90% average on my report card. If I did come home with something less, I would be grounded for the next 15 weeks. And no telephone, no television, nothing, just to get through my schoolwork. But she wasn't cruel. It was never mean. It was just okay, this is the world, and here we are in it, and this is what you're going to need to have, and this is what you're going to need to do to be successful. And so I kind of think that that feeling of like, okay, baby, if you want to make it in this world, you better make it, has kind of always been there. And I keep making it. So that's my Queen of Swords side of my mom. And I'm going to tell you stories about my own mom in each of these cards, because like I said, all moms are, you know, all of it a little bit, but some are more dominant in certain areas than others. And I think my mom is kind of more of a Queen of Swords, Queen of Wands type. So now let's move on to the negative Queen of Swords before the Queen of Wands. Negative Queen of Swords is that coldness, that lack of emotion, lack of affection, distance, can become shunning, can become disowning, very judgmental, has a kind of a know-it-all attitude toward child rearing. They can't kind of ever say they're sorry or be wrong. Those are some of the negative aspects of the Queen of Swords. Hard as nails in that way too. So if you can recognize some of that in your own mom, maybe she had a Queen of Swords element or has. So now the Queen of Wands. So the Queen of Wands is the life of the party. I've mentioned this before in my tarot classes. She is warm, effusive, friendly. She cares about people. When she comes into a room, she is noticed. People just step up and notice her. Even if she's like wearing sweatpants, people are like, who's that? She's got a certain magnetism about her. There's a kind of a laughter, or, you know, she loves to laugh. She enjoys humor. Her laugh and her smile will light up the whole room. She loves to entertain. She enjoys being with other people and socializing. So she's likely to be the kind of mom, for example, who's like, I'm going to bring you can invite like 10 of your best friends, and we're going to go to the theme park for your birthday. Or she's like a kind of mom who's like, come on, let's go like have a spontaneous adventure. Let's jump in the car and go somewhere and just like see what happens. You know, there's something that is always has that little element with her of like adventure and discovery and excitement. And she's always kind of like looking for something that's going to make everybody laugh and make everyone have a good time. She will appreciate your jokes. She is proud of her children. She hangs the art on the refrigerator. She is very like goes in and into the school and is like kind of like, your things are so nice. You know, you're doing better than everybody. That's her. Oh, she's kind of got that little bit of an edge to her. There's a sense of like, I will say with a Queen of Wands with her son, she is just like my son. Like she loves her boy child. A Queen of Wands will be very proud of her boy child. And you know, she'll be proud of girl children too, but there's an element of kind of sometimes what I call mom petition, where it's like competition between moms about how their children are superior. And sometimes that's a Queen of Wands characteristic. It's not the most favorable characteristic, but the little edge of mom petition. The Queen of Wands is she is also a really creative problem solver. So I'll share a story of my mom in Queen of Wands mode. It is like December or January in upstate New York. The temperature hovers somewhere between 30 degrees and like 20 and 30 degrees. It's snowing. And my sister and I are having an argument, and we have been arguing all morning, and we are not showing any signs of stopping arguing. The sitting in the chair has not worked. The having a little time out and talking about it has not worked. We're still bickering back and forth because we have cabin fever and it's January. And so we are going at it, and my mom just scooches us right out the front door, closes it and locks it, and puts us on the porch. And as she puts us out on the porch in the snow in the middle of December, January, she says, I think this is going to motivate you to figure this out really quickly. And then waits there. And my sister and I are there, like hopping from one foot to the other, and can't. And now all of a sudden, and this is the skillful social engineering of the Queen of Wands, my sister and I all of a sudden had a common enemy. And my mom was like, that's fine. You can go ahead and be as mad at me as you want. Write it all down for the tell-all book later. And then goes about her day. And my sister and I didn't fight anymore that day. So there's a little bit of like, sometimes with a Queen of Wands mother, you kind of know you've been tricked into doing the right thing. Like, she's the kind of, it starts with the choo-choo train into the mouth of the food you don't want to eat. And it goes from there into later on in life, she might have a little bit of like a, well, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but I just thought maybe you might want to try doing this. And then you're like, I better do that. I can hear it in her voice. I better follow these instructions. I will tell you, in January of this year, my mother sends me a text. Well, I've been reading about the news in China, and it seems like there's something going on there. And I don't want to seem alarmist, but I just think maybe it would be good next time you go grocery shopping to get an extra gallon or two of bleach and some extra toilet paper. January. That's her like protective, I'm thinking ahead, but I don't want to alarm you. You just might want to think about it. She's the mother who's like, I know you don't like the sweater. I'll tell you what, why don't you bring your sweater and you can just put it in your bag. I'll find you a nice little bag and you can put the sweater in it. Because she knows you will need the sweater, but she doesn't want to fight with you because she's social and sweet and kind, and she'd rather have a nice conversation. So she'll kind of do this. That's like a little sort of social engineering of the Queen of Wands. And I say that with the utmost affection because as somebody who has lots of friends who are mothers, I watch mothers have to social engineer their children toward the right decisions for their whole lives. They have to be like, well, let me put this in front of you. Let me present it to you in a different way. Here, let me just give you a suggestion. And that's because a really smart mom knows that what she doesn't want to do is to trigger the inner 2-year-old who just says no to everything. So there's this aspect in the Queen of Wands of just like warmly holding for the greater good, warmly holding a space, a little bit of a spice or a zest. She's capable of funny, witty things that she'll say, like, my mom's saying, write it in the tell-all book. She kind of mothers with an amused air. Now, a negative Queen of Wands, though, a negative Queen of Wands will have anger management problems and potentially addiction problems. Her addictions are less likely to be sedatives. Her addictions in the Queen of Wands case are more likely to be uppers, things that make her feel a heightened feeling. So caffeine, shopping, things that bring a sense of instant gratification. A negative or reversed Queen of Wands mother can be kind of mean, like mocks you to kind of get the best out of you, like might be into like name calling or the withholding of love or the withholding of approval in kind of a mean way. She's got a little element of always wanting to blame everyone else. So there's an aspect of it's never her fault. the upside down queen, you know, the negatively aspected Queen of Wands. Kind of never her fault. And she's got a little bit of just like a little bit of a fiery temper to her, flies off the handle, or more favorable toward physical punishment. So now let's move on to the Queen of Cups. So the Queen of Cups as a mother, extremely emotionally sensitive. This is the kind of mother who would practice attachment parenting, where she lets her child share her bed indefinitely. This is the kind of mother who is very concerned with her child's emotions. So if the child gets into trouble at school, or you know, is having behavioral problems, she's less likely to say, you know, give a spanking or a scolding, and more likely to be like, what's happening? Why are you feeling like this? Why are you lashing out so much? She wants to negotiate. She's got a sort of a gentle way about her regarding any kind of punishment or discipline. And the good part is that, you know, if she's successful in this, her child will grow up to be very sensitive and very kind and very loving. But the negative part can be that a child who has a really willful personality can run over a Queen of Cups mom and then breach her boundaries. Sometimes the Queen of Cups mom is has a hard time saying no, and sometimes she already has intuited what her children want, and so she's kind of always meeting their needs instead of that teaching them how to ask for things. So there's good and there's challenge to this. You know, her empathy is exquisite. When her child is like, I'm scared, there's a monster in the closet, this is the mom who's like, okay, you know what we'll do? I'm going to get right in this bed with you, and we're going to lay here and we're going to see if the monster comes out, and stays with you until you fall asleep. She has this kindness where she, you know, if her child is having a hard time with a friend, she'll try to smooth it over, or take her child for some special little adventure. This is a Queen of Cups mom, if she has more than one child, is very good at making special time for each child. So she'll find little ways to show each of her children that they're individual to her. So very, very tuned in to their sensitivities and their likes and dislikes and preferences. The Queen of Cups mom is the kind of mom who, if her child comes and says to her any number of things, you know, I'm gay, I'm moving across country, I'm, you know, leaving school and becoming an artist, you know, any number of things that other parents might find a reaction in, the mother of the Queen of Cups as a mother will be like, I just love you and want you to be happy. So there's a grace to this. You know, sometimes the negative is that she gets rolled over, you know, by her child. And a strong-willed child will roll over a mother like this. And then you will see this sometimes come up when a mother is feeling really depleted and exhausted by her children. She's comes in and she sits down for the reading, or she, you know, you get on the line with her for the reading, and she's just like, I am so tired. I'm at my wit's end. I don't know what to do with my kids. They're running me ragged. I have so much going on. I'm taking care of my ailing mother. I am working full time, and it's just too much. And you can see that she is just extremely overwhelmed. She is doing her darndest. And, you know, she is taking it personally that she can't do absolutely everything flawlessly. She starts to feel like maybe it's her, you know, that maybe she's not doing what she needs to be doing, or maybe she's made a mistake somehow. So The Queen of Cups also will have a tendency toward blaming herself if something goes wrong with her child. So if something goes wrong with her child, she takes it very personally. She's like, didn't I try my best? Like, didn't I do absolutely everything I could to try to make this work? She'll take that very personally. In her, positive aspect, she's got a sweetness and a playfulness. This is the kind of mom who will cuddle up under a blanket with you and tell you the most wonderful stories, and they're creative and they're really dreamy, and she'll be like, what do you want to see in the story? And if you're like, I want a unicorn, she's like, okay, here we go. Here's the unicorn. So there's that. She's right there with it. She loves to make you smile. She loves to indulge imagination. She's the kind of mom who will put finger paints in front of you. And if the finger paints go off the page and up onto the wall, she's like, oh, my little genius, we'll get a bigger canvas. Just there's a genuine support of art and artistry and the messiness of creativity around a Queen of Cups mom. This is also the mom who is so psychic, you can't get away with anything. She is like, you can walk in the door and she's just like sniffs you out immediately. Something's up. Something in how my child is walking or how my child is breathing. She just knows. And she has eyes in the back of her head. She sees everything. You can't get away with anything. So I actually did believe, when my mom told me that she had eyes in the back of her head, I actually believed that for the longest time. I was like, how does she do that? Like, where are they? When I was small. This is a positive Queen of Cups experience, is that she's always kind of watching over you. The psychic connection is amazing. This is the kind of mom who can have telepathy with her child. Like, all it is like a flicker of her eyes from the floor to that light switch to the window, and you know that it is time to go and close the door, turn on the light switch, and close the curtain of the window, and she didn't have to say a word. She's got that projective capacity. So now let's talk. Oh, and then one last thing. Also, this can have positive and negative consequences. She's kind of the cool mom, as in the kids all come over to the house to maybe drink together, or she's like, sure, your boyfriend can stay over. This is kind of that sort of a mom. So, and sometimes that's not such a great thing. Sometimes that can be detrimental because, again, if she has a strong-willed child who bowls over the boundaries, then that child and their friends are actually kind of taking advantage of her while she's thinking, well, at least they're all safe, right? She doesn't know that after she goes to bed, they're all going to sneak out and go do something. So there can be a kind of she doesn't usually suspect the worst. She'll find out, though. She'll find out for sure. Now, the negative Queen of Cups. We've mentioned a few of the negative things like poor boundaries. Sometimes this cool mom is also like, you're a little bit like, I'm afraid to bring my friends home because she's a little bit nuts. Like, she's a little bit off kilter. Sometimes in this negative aspect, you have a mom who's actually got a mental health problem. Sometimes with a mom in this aspect, you have a mom who's got an addiction problem. And one of the things that I've noticed about a Queen of Cups reversed type mom, especially one who's got an addiction problem, is that when she is under the influence of substances, something else can come through her that's not actually her. More like a diseased spirit comes through her. And that can be very difficult to reconcile later in life when someone's trying to cope with their parents' drug or alcohol abuse and can see that she really wasn't like that, but that the addiction brought that out of her. So there can be wounding around a negatively aspected Queen of Cups. And there can be a longing also where you feel like the child feels like there will never be anybody who loves them as much as their mom. And so that sort of sense of longing and sadness of like not knowing if they're really loved, not knowing if anyone else can love them as much as their mother. That can be sometimes a pain that comes up with this. Another thing that can come up around the Queen of Cups reversed is codependency, where the mom and the child are very, too intertwined. In a negative aspect, this is the mom who gets like sometimes too involved in her child's relationships. And so she doesn't give her child the space to have the normal lessons of learning that the child needs. She's sort of very involved. So there's sometimes a little bit of an over clinging that can happen there. And that can cause rebellion in a child. So I'll tell you what, when you see this card, Queen of Cups reversed, watch and see if you, especially in relation to a mother, someone's mother, Aquarian's mother, watch and see if that Queen of Cups is reversed. Watch and see if the querent describes their mother as crazy. Oh, my crazy mom. That dismissive thing. Oh, my crazy mom. And then go a little deeper and find out, because sometimes what happens when, especially a negatively aspected Queen of Cups mom, maybe one who's addicted, maybe one whose boundaries have been violated, who's in an abusive relationship, who allows people to kind of steamroll her. It can be really hard. Later on, the child will kind of hate that mother a little bit and kind of feel like that was a bad mother. So that's painful, and especially when you as the reader can see that mom was hurting. She wasn't in her right space. She wasn't in her power or in her strength. So this Queen of Cups reversed can be just a very tragic story. So walk sensitively with it. Sometimes the Queen of Cups reversed can be someone who is on that borderline between being really magical and really psychic and having a kind of a paranoia. And like I mentioned before, can also be that codependency, to where the querent you might get this card when the querent is just waking up to the fact of who they are in this life as an adult, as an individual person. So just be on the lookout for that. Okay, last but not least, the Queen of Pentacles. So the Queen of Pentacles upright, so much the queen of the hearth. She loves to cook for you. She wants to make the home really nice. She likes it to be clean. She wants to make it functional. She's very interested in education and your success as, a student, but not like as much as a Queen of Swords, like hard driving scholastic, but more just like, wants to make sure that you're on the football team if you want to be, or wants to make sure that you get into that class you want to take. She's like your cheerleader. The Queen of Pentacles mom is very concerned about what you're going to do when you grow up. She's very interested in what you are going to do to make a living when you grow up. And she's very interested in your security. So from when you're young, she might already be doing things like putting money aside for you. Putting money into a little separate account somewhere. The Queen of Pentacles, when she's in a positive arrangement, is, she is like, she'll bring cupcakes for everyone in your class. she's or you know, she'll make, actually it won't be just cupcakes, she'll be like, and who's vegan and who's gluten-free, you know, she wants to know, and she'll make sure everyone has all their little things met, and we're gonna make sure there's no peanuts in it, you know. And then I've also brought an apple for so and so who's not allowed to have processed sugar. Like, she's got it all covered. She covers all the bases. If you have a birthday party, everyone gets a little goodie bag. If you do a you know, any kind of like a science project, now we're going to build the volcano out of 17 different layers of cake. Like, she's got that kind of a perfectionism about wanting your life experience as the child to be very rich and for you to have fantastic memories. She wants you to feel like your child, she defines herself based on whether your childhood is going well and you feel happy and you're feeling like you're actualizing. This is often going to be a mother who stays at home or wishes she could stay at home. Her children are everything to her. Big part of her identity is being a parent. And so the Queen of Pentacles has an element to her of like motherhood is really important to her. And she wants to do it well. The Queen of Pentacles also has a very strong tendency toward career. So if she's not a stay-at-home mom, she's still trying to have your life go as if she were one while she's doing her job, and she really wants her job to go well too. So wherever she puts her focus, it's going to be a full focus. The element of Earth is tends to be like a one-track mind kind of a person. So if she's a Queen of Pentacles, like, she's going to have that focus. If that focus is, we're going to buy a house. I met a woman yesterday who told me that she lived for 4 years with her child in a studio apartment that was like as tiny as a postage stamp, so that she could sock away absolutely every dime she made and then buy them a huge, amazing house. And she did exactly that, and then bought the house, you know? So, and now we've got this amazing, huge house. You know, she's got a long range vision. This is going to be the kind of mom who is already trying to prepare you for the future. Her tendency will be toward making sure that you're secure, that you feel confident in yourself, that you really know that you're supported. She excels in, as I mentioned, domestic arts, but she also excels in figuring out how to kind of make $1 out of 15 cents if that's her circumstance. So this is also the kind of mom who, on a shoestring, will be able to pull together that Halloween costume or make a Christmas happen, even if she doesn't have a lot of money. She finds a way, and it's still really nice. You know, there's still that like element of everything just being magical and wonderful about it. A good Queen of Pentacles moment for me with my own mother was when so my sister and I wanted those Cabbage Patch dolls that were so popular, and they were going crazy. Like, people were going to stores and like getting knocked down for these dolls. It was just preposterous, and they were expensive. And each one had a special little name that went along with it. So anyway, my sister and I were just gaga about this, and we were like, we had to have these Cabbage Patch dolls. But of course, we didn't have that kind of money in my family when we were growing up, and my mother was kind of against any brand name thing just on principle, because she was like a hippie, crunchy granola kind of lady. So what she did was genius. She went to I should have brought it today. She went to the department store where they had these earmuffs that were made to look like the Cabbage Patch faces of the dolls. And then she took those earmuffs apart and used them to make faces and made my sister and I homemade Cabbage Patch dolls. And she followed every little detail. She learned, like I had a friend who had one. And so she said, let me see your doll, Molly. And she took the doll and she looked at it all over and figured out how to make it and gave it back to Molly, and then went and secretly made Cabbage Patch dolls for my sister and I and crocheted them individual outfits. That was a Queen of Pentacles moment. We didn't have the money. We didn't have the means. We didn't have any wherewithal whatsoever. And she still found a way to make it happen for probably, I don't know, those dolls were like $100. And I think probably she spent 20 to make these. But it was completely perfect. And she gave them names. She did the whole thing. So that's like a Queen of Pentacles moment with my mom. Really positive Queen of Pentacles moment with my mom. Now, there are negative Queen of Pentacles moments as well. The Queen of Pentacles in her negative aspect, she sort of overly defines herself by her children, and her children can end up feeling a lot of pressure to always make her happy. And instead of learning to discover their own happiness, they feel that her happiness is their happiness. And therefore, then they're trying to please her rather than learning who they are. A child of a Queen of Pentacles can sometimes say, like, that their mom was very, like, strong-armed them into decisions in their life, like wouldn't allow them to stop running track, or wouldn't allow them to stop taking the piano, or told them they absolutely had to go and take, a language in school. I was forced to take Latin. I really am not upset about it now, but at the time, I thought it was a great unfairness. The negative Queen of Pentacles is because she's got that long range vision. Sometimes she's planning her child's future too far ahead, and she gets really more attached to her own outcome than to the child having their own outcome. A negative Queen of Pentacles can be kind of greedy and demanding. She sometimes will sort of expect people to cater to her. And she also has a tendency to be a martyr. Look at all I've done for you. That can be a negative Queen of Pentacles. A negative Queen of Pentacles mom can be a little bit like too attached, like doesn't let her child grow up and wants to keep her child a baby. So negative Queen of Pentacle mothers and their sons, you don't ever want to date their sons, ever. Because their sons will want you to become mommy. So that can be the result of negative Queen of Pentacles. And then we'll try to sometimes that son will play the mother and the girlfriend or wife against each other. And so you sometimes see that negative dynamic of the mother-in-law. So if you get this and someone's like, I just am having a hard time dealing with my mother-in-law, and I just don't know how to like talk to her, and she just seems to hate me, and I don't even know what I've done. Go looking for Mama's little baby boy, because it's actually him who's playing those two against each other. And he goes to mom and tells her how terrible the wife is, and then he goes back to the wife and is like, takes comfort when they're getting along. So, look for that. Sometimes women will want to blame the problems of their actual relationship on their mother-in-law, but it's not actually the case. Sometimes it's just not the case. And I'm not saying this in a sexist way, like this applies to any configuration of relationship. It can be anybody's mother-in-law, but I'm just saying what I usually read for like 60 to 70% of the time at least, if not more like 90, but it depends on what's going on at the time. So other things about the negative Queen of Pentacles: overly materialistic and driven into debt, overweight and causes her children to be overweight, has a kind of a need for her child to always have the latest things and uses things as love. See, other aspects of negative Queen of Pentacles. I think I've already sort of conveyed that there's that controlling aspect. So that's basically, in a nutshell. I'm sure I could go on, and if I had, endless time, we could probably do a whole class on each one of these, and maybe someday we will. But for now, those are the brief introductions to the queens as mothers, both the good and the bad. And now I thought maybe if folks felt brave, you could share if you feel like you can see your own mom in any of these or aspects, or if anything I've said today brought up something about your own mothering. If you're like, well, I could see I was more like this type, or at this other time in my life, I was more like that type. I'm curious what your experiences are of your own mothers or your own motherhood in regards to these queens. And I'm curious about the card that you drew and if it illuminated something for you today. So for me today, my card that came up was the Queen of Pentacles. So I can see, both good and bad about myself, and I'm a Taurus, and so an earthy kind of a person. So certainly I have a lot of those qualities in me, and the way I shepherd a project, I tend to be very, needing to make sure it goes along just so, and I have a very exacting nature. I like things how I like them. I'm very stubborn, but also I create epic worlds of beauty, and I'm not a bad cook, and I make sure that everybody has some of whatever it is that's going on. If there's, one person there, or whether there's 30 people there, I will make sure everybody walks away with something. So there's that nature of the Queen of Pentacles for me too. So curious if you want to share anything, go ahead and give a wave if you'd like to share anything about any of these queens related to motherhood. Go ahead, Christy.
Hello. I drew the Queen of Cups, which I knew from past readings is usually what I'm identified in the reading. So, but I really felt like I really identify with that whole archetype. But I also saw my mother in that too. She was, so it's kind of like a passed down thing. And so we're doing all this work on mother stuff. I was watching Kathy from Avalon, and she was talking about how a child is inside of the mother and the grandmother, and how it's passed on. And I was just like, the connection between Morgan, myself, and my mother, I see a lot of times with Morgan and I that the relationship between Morgan and I is more like my mother and my grandmother, in like we're playing that out. It's really interesting. But yeah, the whole mother thing is obviously right in my lap this month, so it's been great. But yeah, thank you for that. I love the Queen of Cups, and I did see myself in a couple of the other places too, though.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I think that sounds, I totally see it, and that Queen of Cups has been a significator for you for sure. And we all have, all aspects, but I think it's, really interesting that you mentioned that you feel like there's this family kind of legacy. And so it's an interesting thing to think about, like, okay, there's this sort of, what are the good parts of that we want to keep? If this is like in our blood, what are the parts we want to keep and what are the parts we don't want to keep? So, that I guess will be up to Morgan, what parts she doesn't want to
And
keep.
I'll give a little bit of thought about my grandmother in there, because I haven't given a lot of thought about how she mothered my mother, which is I'm gonna have to look that one up. So
Yeah, absolutely. Give
yeah,
yourself time to discover,
yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
the things that come up in this life are things that we might be playing out for our ancestors, and it gives us a chance to heal something within the legacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
that. Tara, did you want to go? Did you give a little wave? Okay, go ahead. Go next.
The first time I waved, it was like, the entire screen. So I just did a finger. So we live, from the mother point of view, we live in an interesting circumstance. We have 3 generations on the same property, and a lot of us are female. There's myself, my husband, my son, my daughter-in-law, and their 2 daughters who are little. And one of the things that struck me the most, well, there were 2 things. One is that we seem to go in and out of the different archetypes freely. So I don't know if I could put my finger on one I think, oh yeah, right, no, not that. Oh yeah, it's the other. So there is that. And the other thing that I noticed that struck me is the times of mothering have changed so dramatically since my kids were my grandchildren's age, that some of these archetypes are, how should I say, socially pushed for. Certain aspects of them, like the hovering parent, the push to have your child perfect, the non-punishing aspect, that it's almost hard. I mean, it seems to me like from the tarot point of view, it would have to be within that specific reading to try to uncover whether it's really the mood of the person who came to you for the reading or what was really going on, because it's so much in flux.
I agree. I think, that contextually speaking, the cards around any of these queens, and specifically if someone's asking about their mother, I mean, just because a queen comes up doesn't always mean it's the mother, right? But if someone is asking you about a mother or about family or about fertility or about their future as a mother, and you get one of these queens, then there's, sort of the jumping off points, which, are vast. I mean, each one is vast. But then the context, the cards around it are going to tell you a lot. For example, as I mentioned, it's just because somebody says, oh yeah, my mom's crazy. Well, if you get that Queen of Cups, it's possible that she actually is, and no one knows it. Sometimes it's possible that she has some kind of a mental situation that has gone undiagnosed, like depression or anxiety, right? And then there can be a real dismissal of her. Other times someone might come and say, well, my mom's crazy, and it's the Queen of Cups, and it's like, oh, you look at the person and you can see this is a person who's very conservative, dressed in a suit, whatever, and you find out their mom is really into crystals and into the goddess or whatever, and then that's what they think of as crazy. And that happens too. I've seen both. It's very interesting to me how many people reject their woo-woo mothers and then come in their conservative bent and try to get a reading from me and ask me to hold that space. But it makes sense because, as any mom knows, sometimes you just can't hear it from your mom. You have to hear it from someone else in order for it to stick. So I completely agree, Tara. Sometimes in the reading, you are serving also as the mother kind of figure and helping someone through an issue, and the cards in the context around it and their given circumstance is going to inform that a lot. Who else has anything they might like to share about the card you drew yeah, go ahead, Mary Beth.
Okay, well, I can totally relate to the reverse Queen of Pentacles for my mother. I mean, when you were describing that card, that was her to a T. So that was very enlightening. And the card I drew was the Queen of Cups. And I came in a little bit late, so I didn't get your whole spiel about that. But I've always resonated with this card because I have 8 children and 6 grandchildren. And motherhood was always my life's goal. And I pretty much have attained that. And now I'm empty nesting. I'm trying to figure out, where do I go from here?
Oop, you covered your microphone, my sister.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
Just trying to figure out, where do I go from here now that my whole life, I mean, I worked and I was a stay-at-home mom, part-time work, went back to school when I was 50 and got my master's in women's spirituality. So I've been very busy with other things besides mothering, but yeah, that's the card I drew.
It's interesting because in relation to your own mother as a reverse Queen of Pentacles, if you were kind of a Queen of Cups type, that ache for the maternal emotional nurturance must have been very great. The desire for a closeness, an emotional closeness, where you felt safe to share your emotions must have been very great. So I imagine that as a mother, that's been one of the things you've tried to do, is to prioritize your children feeling safe emotionally.
Right.
Have you ever had any of them then kind of run you over when you
Oh,
try to
yes.
provide a space?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That was one of
Yep.
the things about the Queen of Cups, is that she's gentle, but sometimes she gets run over.
Right. Yeah. Well, with 8 kids, somebody's bound to do that, right?
That's true. That's true. I dare say with 8 kids, you're sort of always overrun in some capacity.
Right. Yeah.
Whether it's
Yeah.
someone getting into the cookies or somebody, like taking too long in the bathroom or having to sort it out between the toys. So for sure, well, I thank you for sharing that. And yeah, the natural, your kind of natural mystical bent also is reflected in that Queen of Cups. Your spirituality and your contemplative nature is also reflected in that Queen of Cups. And I imagine that for your mother, her love language was more in direct practical acts, not so much in beauty, contemplation, creating special moments. Instead, her love was enacted through control. And for
Right.
her, she thought that was love.
And, she bought us everything that we ever could possibly want. That was how she showed her love, was through material, giving us material, whatever, whatever she could provide. So, and then the Cabbage Patch thing, I have to tell you, my husband and I camped out overnight to buy those Cabbage Patch Kids. We had 4 daughters together.
Oh my word. That must have broken the bank, but I bet they had the best holiday ever.
We still have them in the garage. They're in a special tote waiting to be reclaimed.
I love it. I just recently reclaimed mine, actually, from my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now she hangs out in my little basket of beloved stuffed animals. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Who else would maybe like to share about the card that you drew, or if you resonated with it at all, or anything that you've heard today that you felt like you want to speak to? Go ahead, Vanessa. Yeah, I see you put your antler up.
Like, hi. So I just want to say first that I had Cabbage Patch dolls as a kid and I was obsessed with them. They got into my, every crevice in my brain. They creeped in and all I could do was think about them and I wanted to be with them. It was really weird. And my mom fully supported it and she would get them for me. I got one a year for a couple of years and I didn't know they were so expensive. I had no idea. So I'm going to have to give her a big hug later because I didn't know. But when you were talking about the reverse Queen of Wands, I really heard a lot of my mom in that. And I heard a lot of her mom too. And I thought that the upright Queen of Wands is kind of my mom as well, because she could be really fun with me. I remember she used to have these stretches of time when she wanted to she would play dress up with me and we would dance and she'd let me listen to all of her cool music. And but she also had this explosive temper sometimes, and I remember that really well too. And it's funny because I look at this little black cat on the card, and my mom never had any interest in pets at all until she got older. And she ended up watching my black cat for me when I moved out of the country, and she never gave him back. And to this day, he lives with her. So I was just cracking up. I was like, oh, that's so my mom. She's also got that really psychic thing going on with the Queen of Cups.
Mm-hmm.
Always knew. She
Always
always knew exactly
knows.
what was happening. Something would happen in my life, and the phone would ring, and it would be her. And the same with my grandma. She
Mm-hmm.
would call, like, while we were in a huge fight about something, be like, "What's going on?" And we all came to expect it, and that's just how it is with us.
Mm-hmm.
Even stuff that
So it
happens.
sounds really deep. You've got that, that you have that lineage with that kind of fire in your blood, that creativity, but also the giftedness, that kind of intuition and tapped inness. And I love the story of the cat. I also converted my family with a black cat. They
Really?
Yeah, they were not cat people for their whole lives, and then I brought a black cat home when I was 18, and they fell in love with him and have only ever had black cats since then. They have, like, my mom has 4 black cats right now. I mean,
Wow.
they're
My mom has 2 cats and a dog now, which is just
oh,
insane.
yeah.
She was just saying
So
this morning, she was like, "Black cats are the best cats." She just said that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know. It's really kind of funny when we get to open our parents' eyes to the greatness of having a furry animal companion. It doesn't happen for everybody, and for some people, they're like, "Oh, I don't ever want to have an animal again because I grew up with one." But for me, it has never lost its novelty. That Queen of Wands, yeah, she can be a little bit sharp, and a little bit mean sometimes, a little harsh.
It's hard when you've enjoyed her light and her, upright aspect. That light, it's so kind of casts a spell on you as a kid. It's dazzling, and
Hmm.
when it turns, it's really scary. So
Hmm. I think that is a really good way to describe it. It's almost like when a Queen of Wands mother loves you, it's like the sun shines on you and you alone. And then if she turns that face away, it's either you're engulfed in flames or you're out cold, like in the cold, and there's not, there's no redeeming.
that's
Um,
exactly it.
Yeah, it's funny because really you'd think that it would be the Queen of Cups who would have the bigger gift of guilt, but I personally feel that it's the reverse Queen of Wands has the bigger gift of guilt. Like, I'm going to make you feel so guilty about displeasing me, because she's like the queen, of her world, and you don't want to displease the queen. Sometimes the negative side of a Queen of Wands can be a little narcissism, um, a little too self-involved. I've known Queen of Wands type moms who their children seem to be like their audience. And, I think it's kind of complex because it's healthy for sometimes, like if you're playing dress up and your mom puts on a really glamorous thing and she looks amazing and you can look up to her and she's making you feel wonderful. That's such a beautiful feeling. That's not narcissistic. Your admiration of her is not feeding a narcissism. It's good for children to admire their mothers if their mothers are being amazing. But sometimes, especially in this patriarchal society, it's tremendous wounding that women don't know where to put their greatness, and we don't feel safe to express it anywhere outside of the personal sphere. And so then that can mean that the child becomes like a captive audience to the mother trying to be in her greatness, and that can cause pain for sure. Not saying that's necessarily relevant to what your experience, just that what you said brought up this other layer of it for me. And what card did you get today, Vanessa, for yourself?
You know what? I missed the draw for myself.
Oh, well,
But I usually get the Queen of Cups in readings. It happens a lot. But
that
the
makes a
Wands
lot
has
of
been
sense.
showing up too lately. So
Mhm. Well, that Queen of Cups is very intuitive, very psychic, very tapped in. So, and you said you can sort of see that in your mom too. So, makes sense. How about anyone else care to share their card they drew today, or anything about any of these cards that you've heard that might relate back to your own mother? Give a wave if you want to share, and no pressure if you don't. All right, well, I'm not seeing any more hands. I think but I am curious. I am curious, maybe Morgan, if you'd tell us what card you drew today.
I feel like I knew I was going to be asked. I got the Queen of Wands. I pulled two different decks, so this is one of the other decks, which is really pretty. I mean, I'm not a mom yet, but I can see a lot of these qualities like in myself. I can definitely see a lot of like both like negative and positive aspects of that card. Just in me. But I actually do relate to what my mom said. I feel like I definitely have a lot of like the side grandmother had, and again, like both like negative and positive aspects of her. And I think that parallel is interesting though, to see like what qualities like fall down through like the women in our family, and how that kind of like relates to how then they mother their own children. So it's an interesting lineage to think about, especially when you know about the backgrounds of all of these cards.
Right.
Yeah.
I would love to see if you and your mom could do a reading where you decide ahead of time what are the significator cards that represent your great grandmother and your grandmother. And then that would be like with one of you would do that reading, and then the other would do the reading of what are the significator cards that you think represent you and your mom.
A family tree of queens, if you will.
Yes, a family tree of queens. And you could look at what would be the positive aspects and the negative aspects of each, and kind of like just see if you can get a bigger picture. And before you do it, you could pray and ask your ancestors for their guidance.
Yeah, those qualities that they inhabited through. And I also resonate with the fact that it is like the way the world has been changing even in just the past 20 years in terms of what it means to be a mother, and the pressures that I feel like women are being forced to like take a look at now. And I think there's a weird divide between women who are moms now and what they're being faced with, and a lot of judgments I've seen of women from the other generation, and how that divide has been really severely like being like toyed with right now, with like what does it mean to be a good mom. But the generational differences within even the last 20 years is so great. It's hard to even compare and contrast the two worlds. It's totally different. So it is interesting to think about these cards in relation to women of generations that have passed on, women that are in generations now that are grandmothers at this point, and then what the future holds for that meaning as well.
I agree. Like, for example, growing up, and not being allowed to go and go out with boys or whatever, until I was 16, I thought my Queen of Swords mom was overprotective. But that Queen of Swords mom today would be the one who's like, no, you can't have a Facebook account, right? Or no, you can't have a cell phone.
Yeah, you can have a cell phone at 5. Yeah.
Right, because they're trying to, keep that safe. They're being tough, and they're having to like stand against a tide of, I saw a video, I won't we won't dwell on this, but it's because it's so depressing, but I saw a video of this team of people who pose as young women online, as children online, and they try to catch predators. And they showed how they started like a new account for a seeming like 13-year-old girl, and they didn't put parental controls and on the account, and within something like 35 seconds there was the first man trying to send a message to this child, and within a day it was like over a dozen. It was really heavy duty. And I think you're right, Morgan. I think a lot of moms who raised their kids, like my mom, raised me in the 70s and 80s. We didn't have the internet. I think that moms are being expected to do an almost impossible job of safeguarding their children in these times where the world has crowded in so much more in terms of media and devices, but also it's just a completely different paradigm. And so I think a lot of moms nowadays aren't really prepared, and it's difficult for them to see how they could have ever been prepared because things are happening so quickly. So
Yeah.
kind of learning to identify the classical attributes of personality, at least, so that we can start there, can provide some helpful guidance in a reading. But you're going to definitely want those context cards, and remembering things like swords are about technology, and wands are about physicality, and cups are about emotions and dreams, and pentacles are about wealth and family. Keeping that in mind so that you know what you're really facing when someone's like, my kid's going bonkers and I don't know what to do, to be able to look and go, oh, I see that like 3 of cups reversed. Has your child started drinking or taking drugs? Or I see that knight of swords reversed. Could your child possibly be under the influence of someone online?
Hmm.
And so definitely those context cards can be very helpful as you're reading for mothers, or in the reverse, helping someone understand why their mother is the way they are. Thank you for sharing that. I just was really dying to hear which card came up for you. Uh-huh. All right. So anyone else care to share today before we do an exercise? Okay. I don't see any. All right. So even though it's not super easy to always discern exactly which of these queens your mom is, you could pick up to two cards, 2 of these queens to represent your own mother, and do your best to just pick the 2 that you think are really the most, the closest to her. And then put the other 2 to the side so that they're not in your deck, so that you don't accidentally draw them. And if you only have 1 for your mom, that's fine too. So I've put my Queen of Swords, Queen of Wands, both upright, because on the whole, I think I had a really great mom. And there were definitely, things, but I don't really carry those at this time. So I'm going to put those upright. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to just do a little, 3 card spread around that. We're going to do a card on the left, which represents something that made her who she is. A card on the right, which is about maybe an aspect of what she's becoming or who she's becoming, or if she's passed on already, that can be a message from her spirit. And then a card below, which represents what was her main life lesson. And we're going to do our best to understand our mothers a little better. So take a moment and shuffle your cards and connect with them. And then when you're ready, lay a card to the left that represents something that made your mother who she was. A card to the right, which represents some aspect of her being that is now coming into being, or if she's deceased, it's a message from her. And then a card below that represents what is or was one of her main life lessons. Wow. So true. I'm going to share a little bit here with you. So one thing that it shows here in the past in my reading is the 9 of Swords, which represents, and reversed. Okay, bye, Tara. Thank you. There's this 9 of Swords reversed, which represents fear and loss. And my mom definitely, as a child, she was in a really terrible car accident. one time when she was a child. And she was an only child, and I can very much see how she really had to fight her way through fears in order to go on to become the person that she became. But that, in a way, the courage that she exhibited is because she had a lot of fear growing up. And then, sort of where my mom's headed right now, this makes a lot of sense. She's got the Five of Cups, which is a card of grieving, and she is still very much grieving the death of my father. And the Five of Cups, the specific message of the Five of Cups is that all is not lost, but much has been lost. And I see where she's sort of said to me more than once, I have now got a sense of purpose in my life, but I'm not feeling a lot of joy. I still feel a lot of grief. So that's a very Five of Cups energy, that there's this loss that's really great. And she can still see the perspective that, she's alive, she's got her cats, she's got her kids, she's got her health and her home, but it's hard and she still does struggle. And then the card about like a main life lesson for her is the Magician reversed. And I would say, like, if I could go to my mom's spirit and say something to her, it would be, you have had the power all along. Because she is just an absolute powerhouse. She is just amazing. She accomplishes whatever she puts her mind to. But she's always kind of like, anytime anyone tries to acknowledge her for it, she puts it off. She kind of defers it. She's like, oh no, that's not me, And sometimes then it means that she doesn't get credit for the things she's done, or she doesn't get acknowledgement, or that people have taken advantage of her, or that there've been people in her work who advanced quicker than she did because they had more of a kind of a charisma, but they didn't necessarily always have the quality of content that she had as a teacher. So I can very much see where, my mom, in her brilliance and in her shine, has also gone through times of dimming her own light. And she's had to kind of learn to go ahead and give herself credit. And so now when she does, now that she's in her 70s, she does give herself credit more often than she did when she was younger. And so she'll say something like, she just says it in a very matter-of-fact way. Like, well, when I was, pulling together, here's an example. My mom said to me, after it was about 6 or 8 months after my dad died, and she said, well, at least I've gotten myself back to work and I've been doing some things that are valuable. And I said, oh, well, good. What have you been up to? And she said, well, I was able to write one grant at least for the SPCA. And I said, oh, well, that's good. How much did you raise? Well, I was able to get $60,000 for them to get a new roof. I was like, what? $60,000. She made it sound like it was this little project she had worked on, to keep herself occupied. But she wrote a $60,000 grant and got a roof put on a new roof put on the SPCA at the age of 72, when she's technically retired and a widow, but she's always like kind of demure about it. So I very much see my mom in this reading. Is there anyone who'd like to workshop your reading about your mom and tell us what you see? Anything that's come up that you're like, wow, I really feel like I want to share this. This is a big, this, I really see this, or, anything that calls to you to share. And give a little wave if you'd like to share yours. And it doesn't have to be the whole thing if you don't want. If you want to just share one part, you're safe too. Go ahead, Vanessa. Give it a try.
All right. So to the left of my mom's significators, there's an Emperor card upright. And I do know that she had a really strict authoritarian figure in her life. It was my grandma. So not a man or anything, but my grandma was multiple men's worth of of authority in one very small woman. So I know that that formed a lot of who she is now, a lot of her internal like restrictions and fears. And then to the right, we had an 8 of swords reversed. And this is, I like nodded my head when I put this down because my mom is her own warden, and she always has been. She kind of keeps herself in a prison, and then she's very frustrated about it a lot, and she has a lot of patterns where she kind of keeps herself tied up. And it's really interesting because just this morning, I was reading her pattern to her. There's this app called The Pattern, it's numerology, and it like boom, boom, boom. It just nailed. I mean, she was like, we were both teary, and she said, you know what? One of the timings for her is a time of like figuring out how she's jailing herself and figuring out how to like let go. And she was like, that's crazy. I decided this year that I am not gonna be so mad at myself all the time, and I really want to forgive myself for so many things. And we both just got really teary, and I love that this card is reversed because I feel like it means that she might let these bindings fall off of her because she's the one that put them there. So she's the one that can take them off.
Right. It's like she can see it now.
That it's not everybody else's fault because she spent so long blaming anyone else, including me, but whatever. It's okay. So beneath everything, we have a reversed 4 of Pentacles. So that guy. This card, every time I see it come up in a reading, it's all about like control and like gripping and kind of like strangling the life out of your life because you want to decide how things are going to go and you think that that can actually come true. So kind of stuck in an illusion of control. And I like that it's reversed here too because I feel like it really goes with that message of freeing yourself from your own binds. And my mom does have, I chose her other card. She's the reverse Queen of Wands, and she's also the upright Queen of Pentacles because she is very into things. Like I told you about the Cabbage Patch dolls. She would always buy me designer things that I didn't care about. You know, she needed it to be brand name. And she does have a bit of a shopping addiction. It's her way. And I think the lesson here is just, along with like freeing yourself and forgiving yourself, is like stopping focusing so much on material things and stopping being addicted to accumulating things and like gripping onto them. And once she has things, she keeps them so pristine that she doesn't even enjoy them. So that kind of lesson of like getting a little bit messier and getting a little bit less obsessive about your stuff and your house and your car and going more internal and enjoying yourself instead of your stuff would be like a big part of that. So it was really good.
I think that's a really observant reading and very kind and compassionate reading of your mom and seeing her for her strengths and her weaknesses. And the one thing I might add to the pot when you mentioned that upright Emperor card is that even though it probably does signify your grandmother who's comparably authoritarian, I also got, the words that popped into my mind were respectability politics. And I then sort of was just sort of a blinking light over there in my mind. But then as you went through the reading and you described how she cages herself and the things and keeping them pristine, I started to think, what if the caging of herself and the keeping of her things pristine and the focus on objects and material goods that are within control, you know, what if those aren't the disease, but the symptoms of the disease, and the disease being that there's some inner voice inside of her that constantly is telling her that she has to be respectable according to a certain standard that she was taught, that doesn't actually apply for real in real life, but that she might be holding herself up to that standard. So
I love that. I think that that's a really good way to bring that in and very accurate.
And that way, then if you want to help her out of it, the question isn't so much like, why do you have all this stuff? The question is, who do you think is judging? And if you can get her to see that there is no one judging, that might give her freedom. So I would say, like, if I were going to do healing with her, I would take her out to go do some pottery class where you're going to go get messy and make a thing. And the thing is not going to be perfect, but you're going to have affection for the imperfect thing because we did it together. And that might help her relax a little bit into that feeling of like, oh, it's really more about the fun and the experience, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And you get that moment of relaxing because she's in this lifelong pattern, and you may or may not end up breaking her of it, but you can give her moments of distracting her from it.
I love that. I'm going to do it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else care to run through their reading? Go ahead, Caregwen.
Okay, so I would just want to start out with, I had two significator cards. I had the Queen of Pentacles and the Queen of Swords, and Pentacles and then Swords. So on the past influences, I got the Six of Cups, and definitely, you know, growing up, my mother didn't have anything, so my parents adopted me, so I was an adopted child, and because my parents didn't have a lot growing up, it's just like I had everything, and I had everything, and there was also a lot of expectations on me. So so definitely it was a little bit rough because I mean it was piano, ballet, jazz, you know, Hawaiian, horseback riding, flute. I mean, this is the kind of thing that it was for me growing up, you know. Piano, I said piano, and
just all of it.
All of it. Boom, right? So it's just like, definitely, it's like, and that's, you know, it was because of her childhood, you know, definitely. So so on the other side of that, which I had the Queen of Swords, I got the Three of Swords, which is really interesting because there's a part of my mother that and I love my mother, don't get me wrong, but there's a part of her that's emotionally very childlike. She hasn't evolved there, and I think a lot of it has to do with the generation that she was raised with, and you know, and the hurt and the pain and the constant, you know, having to oppress and repress all kinds of emotions, actions, and all this kind of stuff. So having the Three of Swords there is totally accurate because I am currently doing ancestor work, which means I am contacting my the parents, my birth parents. And and my mother's very supportive of that, but my mother also too will go inside. And what I mean by that is like go in her head, you know, and she'll just like go through all these like scenarios, and she'll blame herself because of the way she, you know, all these dynamics that we had, and just everything else. So even though it's like, you know, and I've shared this with her because it's like I don't want any kind of like big secret, you know. I've been very honest, but you know, kind and honest, and so it's like, and she's strong, but the thing is she's strong in that moment, and then she starts to think, and that's, you know, the downfall. So the Three of Swords, totally appropriate, because there's probably a part of her that thinks that I'm going to run away with this new family, and it's not like that, you know. And then what's interesting is I got the Moon card as the one that it's all sitting on top of, and my hit off this Moon card is, you know, the Moon card can be taken in a lot of different ways, but my hit off of this Moon card, and especially with my spirituality and you know, and just doing and just, you know, being a lover of the goddess, and doing the things that I'm doing, it's just like, you know, in her mind, because of the fundamentals that she was raised with and her foundation, it's just kind of like this Moon card is everything that she was taught to think is opposite. It's just like, I'm actually a good person, you know. It's like I'm, you know, I'm, you know, I'm not a bad person even though I'm not Christian, kind of thing. You know, just everything. It's like, I'm not going to run away. It's like, I'm still right there. I'm not going to like go with these new parents or whatever. And I think that that's what the Moon card's going to kind of be, because of the fact that she's probably in this huge kind of self-willed anguish, more or less. And, you know, her big lesson going into, she's going to turn 80 this year, is going to be that, you know, that's not reality. That's not the reality of it, you know? So it's going to be more or less, it's kind of going to be like a changing of her mind of what that can be at 80 years old, you know? So
Yes, I love
that's what I
that.
got.
I think that's very true. I think, you know, one of the things I perceive in that Six of Cups reversed is I really understand what you mean. She wanted you to have a picture perfect childhood because, but she was basing that picture in her mind on something she had never experienced.
Right.
So she knew how to create the aesthetic of a picture perfect experience without it necessarily having the other aspects of a picture perfect experience. And then in the Three of Swords, I mean, there's also the suffering that she's been going through with her leg and those things.
Yeah.
I think you're right that there's this self-induced heartache that she
Right.
has over whether or not you'll still love her as
Right.
your mother. And I also think there may be some anguish there that is yet unresolved about her reasons for choosing to adopt in the first place.
Right.
Was she not able to have children, you know, or was there some issue? And you know, that's a wild animal, female animal grief that just doesn't go away.
Right.
You know, having lost a baby or having had fertility, you know, infertility.
Yeah, they couldn't have children, you know, and they had like waited like 10 years and then this like guy came along. So no, you're right.
You know,
Yeah.
there's that aspect of maybe unresolved pain, but I thought that moon is interesting because it also signifies that, you know, your mother still has some amazing learning in her yet.
Yeah.
And if she can get comfortable with, I mean, all of these things you just described are basically discomfort with the unknown.
Right. Right.
And if she can get more comfortable with the unknown,
Right.
it's going to prepare her for the ultimate unknown also.
Right. Absolutely.
So I feel like, you know, now you are going to be in a really good position to sort of shepherd her into that 80th year with just a sense of like, you know what I've decided, Mom, is that no matter what happens, we will be okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's really what she needs to hear, is that no matter what else, if the world came to an end, if I meet my other mom, if anything ever happens, you and me, we will be okay.
Right.
Because that childlike part of her mind will feel reassured. That's what a child wants to hear.
Yeah.
Is it'll be okay. So I wish you luck in all of this. And in, you know, I also see a message for you there in that moon card, which is that it's almost as if in my mind, there's this two cards that represent your mom, and then the card about her past and the future, and the moon, and that the moon card is above a second set of cards with a left and a right and a bottom about your birth mother that is yet to be discovered.
Okay.
Almost like that moon represents the unknown for you as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And also not trying to and I just got this hit right now, and not falling into kind of any dispelling like illusionment, you know, when it comes to like, oh, the grass may be so greener, or it could have been so greener, and all this kind of stuff. You know, it's just like, boom, let's just stay in reality here, you know.
Right.
Absolutely. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing this heartfelt share. And I just, you know, wish you all the very best, as you know, and pray for your happiness in this path of this self-discovery that you're doing.
Absolutely.
Well, everybody, I could go on and do this all night long, but we're going to come to a close now. But I'm just going to take a peek into the chat in case there's anything there. Okay, good. So folks who had to leave sent me notes. And so I'm going to post this video in the next day or so. And I keep a little channel on my YouTube called Tea and Tarot, where you can go back and watch these videos if you want to. You just look at Yesha Matthews on YouTube, and I'll be there. And you can look for the Tea and Tarot videos, and then you can find this one if you ever want to go back and rewatch it, or if there's anything else you want to observe about it. And I wanted to say thank you, everybody, for sharing today, for talking about what you were experiencing, for opening your hearts. And I hope that this has been helpful to look at the Queen Mothers of the Tarot. And someday we'll do a separate one for the King Fathers, but that's another day. I will be back here this time next month. Please do, if the reason you're here is because you got an email from me saying to please come and be invited to come to this Tea and Tarot, wonderful. Please, if you'd like to keep receiving emails about it, send me an email saying, put me on the tarot list, because then I'm going to make a tarot list for this monthly gathering to send you a reminder a few days ahead, and then to send you the link to the video a few days after so that you can have it there. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day. And thank you for coming. And we'll talk again soon. Bye.